Hey guys!
Your business can be a part of Colorado Outspoken.
You can have your logo at the beginning and end of each of our programs.
And on our website.
We have sponsored packages for any pocketbook.
Send an email to sponsor@ColoradoOUtspoken.net.
Or call us at 303-861-0829.
I will contact you personally, and you can be a sponsor of Colorado Outspoken.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Colorado Outspoken. I'm Stephen Montez. On tonight's show, we'll be taking a look at the Colorado Leather Weekend, and we'll go to a celebration of 20 years of gay pride. But first, we're going to explore the issue of same-sex marriage, whether it's called marriage, civil unions, or something else. Emotions run high among those supporting it and those against it. A Colorado independent filmmaker has produced a documentary on this issue, exploring the views of people living in Larimer County, Colorado. We are very pleased that the producer has made his documentary available for airing on Colorado Outspoken. Here's Marriage Dialogs.
Well, you know, I think there's a lot of levels, a lot of layers to what is a marriage. It's a legal commitment to sharing life together. But, you know, I think that marriage is really, it's obviously a relationship. People get married for various reasons. I may be going way off the topic here, but people get married for a lot of different reasons. Some people get married for financial reasons. Some people get married because they defying their parents. Some people get married because they love somebody and they want to spend their life with them.
You know, I guess I've only ever had one definition of marriage. Quite simply, it's the union between a man and a woman. Some sort of ceremony, some sort of religious aspect to it that is a creation of a relationship, a bond that is entered into with the intent of having it last forever.
I have always accepted the standard definition of marriage as I perceive it to be. A legal arrangement between two people. Before, I would have said between a man and a woman. I'm reluctant to narrow it down quite that much now, but something that authorizes them legally to be together, whether it's by the church or by the state.
Well, it's defined in the Book of Common Prayer as a holy union between a man and a woman. And that's the Episcopal teaching, it's the Christian teaching, and it's the worship of the church. But the United States was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and marriage is a Christian ceremony before it's a political ceremony.
It's a contract. It has been in this country, a contract. Contracts are not, you know, that all too often forgotten phrase, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's and the things to God that are God's. And contracts are Caesar's, I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. And and that's what marriage is in this country. People can talk about going to church and getting married, but the reality is they also sign a civil contract. No matter what church it is, they sign a civil contract.
It's a commitment to another person in a very deep and meaningful way that says, I am committed to you in love and pretty unconditionally.
And you know, now all of a sudden we have this coming to a full boil where we have gays and lesbians suddenly wanting in on this heterosexist, patriarchal, oppressive social institution. Naturally, I'm curious and I think, why the change of heart?
Since there are societal implications for whether or not you are quote-unquote married, it is an important thing. If those societal implications were granted based on a civil union or a marriage, then it wouldn't make a darn bit of difference. I don't care what you call it.
And again, it concerns me to try and take a political route for a human rights issue. So I'm more at pursuing the human right aspect of it. You know, I believe that whatever organization has a right to choose what they're about, to choose their doctrine, and to play that out. And that they would also have the right to say, no, we don't choose to marry homosexual couples. That's their right. But for them to come and say that their religious and spiritual beliefs override my religious and spiritual beliefs is a whole different thing.
Well, the way I look at it is it's not necessary to validate our relationship. We've already done that. It is necessary to obtain the benefits that other couples in this country have available to them, that same-sex or opposite-sex couples have available to them. And you know, we would like at least the opportunity to explore having those benefits as well. So in that sense, yes, we would like to be married.
We could not be more committed to one another now. So if we were able to get married, legally we would do that because there would be certain tax advantages or certain legal advantages to us. And I would like the option to be able to do that.
The core of it personally is I want to be able to have a legal relationship with my partner.
So any two people who want to make that commitment to each other, why withhold it? I don't understand why withhold.
I think I would have a problem. I do, because I don't want it to become so mainstream and so accepted that my kids are raised with the notion that just maybe it's okay because everybody else seems to think it's okay. I think that's a pretty popular, I mean, you have that peer pressure. I think that's a real thing. I think it can really affect the decisions that you make. And so if it does get to the point where it is just completely okay and accepted, and our neighbors and everyone else and my kids are surrounded with that notion, I think it can influence them, and that's not an influence that I want them to have.
You know, that, so that's, you know, it's just, why should government, in a say, promote a lifestyle that is not healthy for people? You know, and I'm not saying we should hurt them or discriminate or we should do anything bad to them. I'm not saying that at all. I mean, what people do behind closed doors, consenting adults, that's between them. You know, I don't want to get involved in that. But I don't want them coming out and going to a school teaching my grandkids that what they do is okay and permissible and fine and acceptable and good. And because they are trying to do that. And they will if you let them.
I consider it to be, if not at least one of the most important domestic issues of our time, because it strikes at the most basic unit of culture. It asks us such a fundamental question. There are a lot of big issues out there today. You know, medical costs are going through the roof, and people wonder about how they're going to manage if they get some you know, big illness of some sort. Energy costs seem to pinch us so hard, and we wonder how that's going to sort out. Education issues are very, very significant and have great impact, but all of those pale compared to what of the family unit? How do we view that? Do we, as a people and a country, seek to promote as strong and healthy a families as possible, or are we going to take more of an experimental approach and at the very minimum embracing an anything goes attitude towards marriage is a phenomenal experiment. Now, I see enough evidence in other countries who have started down that road to say we don't need to, we should never go that way. We need to look at the 21st century as a time of change that needs the stability and the strength of solid family units to glue our culture intact, if you will.
From a religious point of view, I think that the behavior is wrong. I don't think they are inherent rights, because I don't think the relationship that those people have has been institutionalized in the past or falls under the term marriage. What's happening is people are saying, you know, well, I kind of look like a duck and I quack like a duck, so I should be treated like a duck.
If it becomes an issue where someone is part of someone redefines homosex then as not falling under this category of sin, and would point then to a law in our governments, that allows for it, to say, well, see, it's been justified at this level. How then can you say that it is wrong? And not so much just the rebuke of the individual. That's fine. It is what it means for the restricting of what, as you said, the freedom of a church or an individual follower of Jesus Christ to speak very clearly. This is sin.
How do you use the Bible to reach the conclusions you reach? Because the conclusions I reach are completely different. And I want to get into that type of discussion and try to get more insight into why they're so willing to use only certain verses to reach their conclusions.
Oftentimes people say the Bible is contradictory, even within itself and within the values that we hold today in society. I don't see it as that. I see the Bible as unified. When we read in Leviticus about the prohibitions against same-sex relationships, people say, well, there are also prohibitions against eating shellfish and pork and things like that. Those were laws that were dietary laws, which were functioning at the time. The prohibition against homosexuality is a moral law. Dietary laws are temporary. Moral laws are permanent. When Jesus declares that it doesn't matter what goes into a person in terms of food, but what comes out of him in terms of deeds and words, he made all foods clean. So when you study these things and when you really look at Scripture as an integrated whole, it does make sense. Or at least to us, it does.
Just because you're gay, first of all, doesn't mean you can't be a Christian. Because I'm gay and I consider myself Christian. And I think a very important tool is to really know your stuff. Because when people try to argue, oh, well, homosexuality is wrong, it says right here in the Bible, I've gone through, and there's 2 places in the Bible that I'm aware of, that I've read, where it condemns homosexuality if you choose to translate things that way. And one of them, of course, is in the New Testament. I believe it was with Paul, when he's out speaking in the various cities around the Mediterranean. And if you translate it from the Greek, the word homosexual is not used. The word is promiscuous. But translations, these things get translated over and over and over and over again, and you have words such as promiscuous ending up as homosexual in some of these later versions. And another place in the Bible is in Leviticus in the Old Testament, where it talks about, man shall not lay with man. But you have to realize what the situation was at the time. You have to put these things in historical context. Because Judaism, at the time that was written, there were a lot of diaspora Jews. They were spread out everywhere. They didn't have a cohesive unit. And they were trying to promote people to have children, because that's how you spread Judaism. It was through a birthright. So the more children you had, the bigger your community would be. So they chastised people that could not have children, such as people who were gay, people who were sterile, and people who did not marry.
The very first statement says, we believe Scripture to be the authoritative guideline for us in faith and living. Because I believe in what I would call the original autographs. Those are the actual written documents of men who wrote, inspired by God's Spirit, who actually wrote those words, and those words then being kept through the years and translated from, for example, Greek in the New Testament and Hebrew in the Old Testament to English, or to whatever other language. And when you look at the historical evidence for the reliability of that transmission, it gives me a great confidence that what I have here is that the Word of God given, yes, an English translation, but a very reliable English translation. So I'll use the term homosex as being something that I believe that the Bible, homosex, defines as sin.
Well, people often ask me, aren't you afraid that when you interpret, that you'll end up with your interpretation and not with the Word of God? And I say, yes, I'm worried. That's a possibility. And that's why I spend so much time studying the nature of interpretation. And even if you assume, as I do, that the Scriptures are divinely inspired, they're still written in a human language. And if they're written in a human language, it can't be the literal Word of God. Now, it's hard to say this without getting in trouble with some Christians, but really, you have to understand the nature of religious language. You have to understand it's always historically and culturally conditioned. There's no pure revelation. I mean, we're talking about editing. For example, editing a film is already an act of interpretation. And what text you like to quote and what text you tend not to notice, that's a huge act of interpretation. Translation is a huge, huge act of interpretation. And most people are reading the Bible in English. They don't realize it's already been interpreted. On every single line they're reading is an interpretation.
Well, even if you do view the Bible as the literal Word of God, there's so much room for interpretation of that literal word. So how do you come to the truth? What is the Bible actually saying?
So a fundamental tenet of our faith is prophets, right? So each age has needed a contemporary prophet to, quote, clarify and receive new revelation if needed. The prophet of our church and the various other leaders high up came up with basically a statement about marriage. And the basic tenet was the family unit is the unit by which God does His work. Mother, father, children.
Well, first of all, I think it extends way beyond the Judeo-Christian religions as well. I mean, you'll find it supported in Islam. You'll find it supported in Confucianism and in many of the world's religions and philosophies, simply because, for me, it is truth.
How do we approach marriage? How do we approach gays and lesbians and bisexual folks and their relationship to the church? I think somebody once said you can take the whole Bible literally or you can take the whole Bible seriously. You just can't do them both at the same time. Interestingly, the words of Jesus recorded in the Bible say not one word about homosexuality. Not one word. They say a lot about material wealth. It's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. But I haven't seen any churches barring the doors of the church to people who are affluent. It baffles me to see churches who are so agitated about the inclusion of people who aren't heterosexual when Jesus didn't really say anything about that. But then in the same breath, to take the essential messages of Jesus that we have from the gospel and not to pay attention to them. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor." He didn't say, "Blessed are the straight."
I have a sister and brother-in-law who are born-again Christians. My sister and I were very close growing up. We did grow up in a very conservative family. Since her conversion, based on her religious convictions, my partner and I have never been allowed in her home. We have almost no relationship with she and her husband, and they continue to maintain that it's based on their deeply held religious convictions that should they essentially allow us into their home or allow us to have any relationship with my niece and nephew, that they then somehow condone or go against their religious beliefs. And they've agonized over this. That's why I say I think for some folks on the religious right, they do have this extremely deeply difficult moral struggle going on. Again, not one which I understand, because to me it's as un-Christian as you can get. And at the same time, she's not a hate monger. She's not someone who's going to go out and bomb buildings or those kinds of things. Yet I think the approach is just as destructive because we no longer have a connection.
Marriage, in terms of civil marriage, if you will, conveys a lot of benefits. In fact, the General Accounting Office, I think, came up with a number of 1,138 benefits that are conveyed by civil marriage. And so civil marriage has become an issue because it's an equity issue.
What we're trying to do is draw the bright line around what marriage is, does, and looks like, but recognizing that regardless of one's personal relationship with somebody, adults should be able to enter into contract with one another on mutual agreements, such as property disposition or a durable power of attorney gives you authority over someone else's medical care if they're incapacitated. I have one of those for my father. That's a very appropriate thing, and we're trying to not jeopardize any of those very legitimate needs that every citizen needs to have access to. But when it crosses the line so that it really is trying to define or redefine or to define marriage or something that's identical to marriage or very similar, that's where we need to say, no, wait, time out, that cannot fit. And understand, I am not prohibiting people from their own private affairs, but I am saying as the state, we should not be changing the definition of marriage to accommodate this small minority within the population.
For instance, if I own a home, and I've owned my home for 10 years and have a fair amount of equity in the home, and want to make my partner a co-tenant in my house and give 50% of an interest to him, that is actually a taxable gift, to which there is a gift tax. Now, if I marry someone and want to put them on the deed of my house, tax-free. If you add your spouse or children to that, and let's say you've married someone who's a widow who has 3 kids, minor kids. You put her and all 3 of the kids on your health policy, that is still a tax-free benefit from you that your employer provides. You do not pay income tax on the value of that health insurance premium. However, if you have a same-sex partner, and let's say they have kids, And we need to get the kids health insurance. And so I'm fortunate enough to work for an employer that allows my same-sex partner to be dependent upon my health plan and their kids. That is not a tax-free benefit. That is considered income, because the relationship between me and the additional beneficiaries is not one recognized by the government as just something over and above that your employer is giving you as a benefit, but it's not a tax-free benefit because it's not to someone that you're married to. And so all of the value of the health care for your partner and their kids is considered income upon which you pay income tax.
You know, bottom line is, when it's clear that, like this friend of ours that lives in Salt Lake and has a partner, that when his partner's in the hospital, she ought to be able to go and see that partner. Okay? They should be able to transfer property to each other, hold assets in common. And I think all of those can be done without marriage or a civil union. I think there are remedies, legislative remedies.
Well, this is actually a cautionary tale, because Sarah's illness was so unexpected. It came so out of the blue. And when her cancer was diagnosed, it was very advanced. And I mean, we literally went from normal life one day to full-fledged crisis mode the next, and stayed that way for the 5 months until she died. So once she died, I had all of this crazy stuff to deal with as far as her estate was concerned. And I know one of the things that seems to be popular right now with lawmakers who are absolutely hell-bent on preventing same-sex couples from having civil marriage is you can get everything that heterosexual couples have through, legal papers, which, number one, is not true. Number two, I'm sorry, that's a pretty onerous burden to put on somebody. What I discovered in my experience, and it's little things that you'd never think of. Sarah was a human resources manager at HP. That was great because HP allowed us to be domestic partners, which is wonderful because I had health insurance. She had named me as beneficiary on her 401k. But guess what happens when it comes time to deal with that 401k? You've got two choices: roll it over or cash it out. Cash it out, you get the tax penalty, right? Well, you can't roll it over unless you're the legal spouse. I had to take the tax hit because I did not have a legal relationship to Sarah. And that wasn't HP, that's the IRS. That's a government regulation.
it all hinges on whether one believes that homosexuality is a choice, or whether one believes that it is physiologically or biologically dictated.
Yes. Homosexual acts are a sin, not homosexuality itself. And whether it's genetically determined or not has not been, at least I don't think, scientifically proven one way or the other. So the church, or at least I view it as a lifestyle choice.
It is not a choice. It's something that happens, and you can't change it either. No matter how much you pray, it doesn't change.
Well, for those who say that you're born homosexual, there's no evidence to that effect, that there's no definitive evidence there. And there are a whole lot of activities of human experience that we can convince ourselves that we've just got to be this way or do that, or, you know, and I'm not trying to be specific to anything there. But no, I don't see the evidence. I see a lot of propaganda out there to try to make us all believe that that's the case, but they've rushed right over the evidence.
But I wish these people would look at their own process and realize, hey, if I didn't make a choice, maybe no one makes a choice.
I look at it kind of on three different levels. One is sexual identity, one is sexual behavior, and one is sexual orientation. If I look at it that way, I can say sexual identity is how I identify. And I can do that regardless. I can say I'm gay, I can say I'm straight, I can say I'm bisexual, asexual, whatever. I identify publicly with something. I can behave in a certain way, and behavior is certainly influenceable. I behaved in a certain way growing up, and I was strongly influenced by my culture to do that. How I choose to behave and how I choose to identify, I do have a lot of choice over that. I firmly believe that orientation, I don't have a lot of choice over. Orientation is who I am. It's how people want to say it. It's how I was made, whatever. It's kind of my makeup. And I think that people do, on that continuum, have an orientation. Whether they choose to behave that way, honor that, identify with that, is up for grabs. And so I would say for most people, myself included, my orientation was not a choice. Okay? Only how I behave and how I identify are my choices. And I can choose not to act on who I think I really am. When they're out of alignment, I think it's not conducive to the best mental health for people.
I had a college friend who was quite, we were all quite close, this group of friends. And we didn't know it at the time, but it turns out that he was, had homosexual tendencies, okay? So here you had someone that was born and raised in a very religious context, and was there along with everyone, but in his heart was struggling with something, because he definitely had tendencies towards homosexuality. Kind of heard after the fact that he had actually struggled with living in this religious context and having these tendencies, that it got to the point where he took his own life. So he just couldn't. Here was someone who was very religious, and yet could not kind of rectify, why he was feeling these other feelings. That for the first time for me was when I really internalized that I can't just label willy-nilly someone and say, oh, you have these tendencies, you know, you shouldn't. Just change. If you really just put your mind to it, you wouldn't think that way. This was an individual that did not want to, in his heart of hearts, did not want to have these tendencies, and yet they were there every day of his life. I can't pass any judgment as to, you know, did God make him that way? Did he make himself that way? That's a realm where it's hard to talk about.
There are some people who, from the moment they have an awareness of sexual attraction, find themselves attracted to members of the same sex. And it never changes. And it happens at an early age. Then there are some people who have been attracted, have been with members of the opposite sex, and I'm just going to make up a scenario, have had difficult, damaging kinds of relationships, and then evolve a friendship with, say, a member of the same sex. And the friendship develops into a connected, bonded relationship, and they start to develop sexual attraction to that individual. It tends to happen more with females than with males. And then one thing leads to another. They find themselves in a lesbian relationship. In the former, I really do truly believe that the cause for the experience is most likely or mostly rooted in nature as opposed to nurture. In the other situation, we look at this now woman who's living a lesbian lifestyle and is attracted to a woman. That's more environmental. And to me, what I just described to you after 30 years of teaching human sexuality and studying this whole issue is most sensible. It makes most sense to me.
And then there are studies out there. I read one from Concerned Women for America. This is a few years ago, where the median age of a homosexual was 44 years old. If they get AIDS, it's 39. And for lesbians, it's somewhere, I think, under 45%. And they said, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but they said they had all kinds of data that 1% lived to be 65. And there are studies out there, but you know, the news media doesn't touch it with a 10-foot pole because it looks like they're hateful because you report facts. But there is a health issue, and we all know that most AIDS is a sexually transmitted disease. Probably 90% of AIDS, which is a world problem in Africa and in America in places, and where people are having sex out of marriage and sex with other people, and so AIDS is spread mainly by sexual misconduct, I guess, in God's eyes. I don't mean to be judgmental. I'm just stating facts.
This one man, who I said was acquainted with Welker, talked about how it's very unhealthy to be homosexual. You live shorter lives, and so I couldn't resist it. I went up to him afterwards and I said, please explain to me, how is it I'm almost 70 years old, and I have been gay all my life, and I seem to be in excellent health. Those people who say that a homosexual lifestyle is unhealthy say that because the homosexual lifestyle that they are exposed to is the one that is portrayed stereotypically by the media. The science here and the surveys here show us that's just nonsense. for the major majority of people identified as homosexuals. They don't have that kind of a lifestyle. It is not large amounts of insatiable sex with lots of frequent partners. But it's mostly a normal kind of living. Two people living together, trying to get along and working in society and sometimes raising children and sometimes not. That's the majority, not getting in trouble with the law, not having a high degree of drug addiction or alcoholism. That's the majority of the homosexual, and they do not live an unhealthy lifestyle. Is there a percentage of homosexuals that live a unhealthy lifestyle? You bet there is. Just like there's a percentage of heterosexuals that live an unhealthy lifestyle. But the problem is that we have been subjected and bombarded with the stereotypical unhealthy homosexual lifestyle. And the tendency is to make inferences from that information to all of the individuals identified as homosexual, and that's where you come up with that kind of stereotype.
And one of the things I've learned is that that gay males are wired, I've come to understand this, the same way that straight guys are wired. And that is, they're wired to think about sex 24/7. And that the reason that there is a male and a female coupling, that this ought, well, I would say ought to be the normative standard that society ought to uphold. Understanding that not everyone will be able to attain to that standard. And, you know, we would certainly have to try to make accommodations for that, and I think American society has, to a large degree. It's just, but it's the effect that a woman has on a man, and a man has on a woman. I've seen it in my own relationship, my own marriage, the domesticating qualities of a woman on a man.
I think it's easy to stereotype people you don't know. And I think society has been so rigorous on this and not allowed gays to have a committed public relationship, that I think we bear some responsibility for the promiscuity that went with. You know, you had to just fly in the face of culture when you finally acknowledged that you were gay. And there was no way to have a public, committed relationship and adopt children and be a different kind of a family, but be a loving, supportive family. There just wasn't any way to do it.
It's something we haven't talked about too, is that, you know, if you don't have a definition of marriage now, you know, and if we try to change it, where does it stop? Right now, where it has been or is basically between a man and a woman. It has been throughout civilization for about 6,000 years. So, you know, a year and a half ago, a lady in India tried to marry, she married her dog. And a guy in Boulder about a few years ago tried to marry his horse. And I think the courts threw it out. So you finally let the cat out of the bag that, well, can two men marry one woman? Can two women marry one man? Can brothers marry sisters? Can people really marry their pets? Because they do love them, you know. I mean, we love our pets. Sometimes you love them more than you do your spouse, in some cases. If you take the religious part out of it, which we talked about for quite a while, you know, the spiritual part or God part, if you take it over and switch gears and say, well, where did you finally draw the line? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now, see. And finally, then you get into disputes down the road with courts and lawyers and on different situations, and it's sort of like, life is very confusing, you know, about where do you end up and where do you draw the line, see. So you draw the line. I say draw it where it's at and leave it at that.
For somebody to say, well, if you allow two women to marry, then what's to prevent, you know, they talk about men marrying little boys and people marrying their pets. They're lumping me in with all of this craziness. They have just equated my relationship with Sarah to somebody who would marry a dog. They have just done that. Again, that is so outrageous. It is so disrespectful. It has nothing to do with reality. It has everything to do with igniting people's fears. It has to do with, my God, I don't even know what it has to do with. It is so immature. It is so ignorant. I can't believe that grown people are actually saying those things and thinking those things. It is just, it's utter nonsense.
And coming back to the reason I mention them, because in natural law tradition, consent isn't the measure of all good. It's a necessary but not sufficient measurement for judging whether a relationship ought to be legitimated by the state or not. You see, for example, you say any two consenting adults. Well, a hypothetical situation could be an adult daughter and her father. Two consenting adults. Should the state be interested in that? I think the social ramifications, yeah, the state should be. And the fallout, the social fallout as a result of that, and the social disruption, and the tearing of social fabric, I think are things that we can't really kind of like wish away. And you know, another nostrum I hear as well. Whatever two consenting adults do in the privacy of their own bedroom is their own business. Well, private acts do have public consequences, and I think that's, you know, you don't have to look very far. AIDS was writ large was a manifestation of private acts having public consequences.
I think there are some things that most people, probably 99.9% of the American public, would say there are some things that are not all right, and obviously adults having relations with children are not all right in terms of that type of thing, of a marriage relationship, or it's not all right for adults to engage in sex with animals.
When I was covering this issue in '97 is when it came up. And so I wrote a lot of stories about it. And one day, I'm sitting in my office and I get a phone call. And it is from someone in the gay community who just tore into me about my stories and how awful they were and how biased they were and how clearly I was supportive of those who oppose gay rights, and I'm just doing a terrible job. I mean, just really tore me to pieces. And it's one of those things, a lot of these kind of calls, they don't really want to discuss it, they just want to vent. And so I just let them go, and okay, and argued a bit, but not much, because there's no point. The very next call, and I mean this is within a minute, the next call is from someone on the other side of the spectrum, someone from the far right, if I can use that term, ripping into me about how awful I am and how biased my stories are and how clearly I'm pushing the gay agenda. And that was all within the same morning. And so, of course, I came away from that thinking, well, I must be doing a good job. But
because every time we open our mouth, somebody steps on us. When we express our beliefs, the newspaper, which is ever so slightly over to the liberal side, doesn't always paint us in a good light. When that original newspaper article came out a year ago, August, it created a furor amongst half a dozen of my congregation. How dare I say these things? And I said, but these are the teachings of the church. I said, well, that's certainly not what we believe. Well, okay, fine. And I had a group of people stomp out, 1 by 1, 2 by 2, a family or whatever, until about 20 people left. And that's fine,
It's not a high priority issue among the general folks. So if you were just to do polling, and like we do in a campaign, we actually do some pretty extensive polling to find out what are the issues that people are really concerned about. And I will tell you from the general polling that we did, they were concerned about jobs, they were concerned about health care, and they were concerned about education of their children, and they were concerned about the safety of this country. So there were a lot of other items that had a much higher priority over whether gay couples should have marriage rights. I mean, that was way down the list.
Yes, I can say that with unequivocal certainty that this is very important to the people in District 49, both from just incidental connections with them. Just came from a town hall meeting in Loveland, and this subject came up, and the majority of the people showed strong interest, and it was about the same percentage of opinion as I found when I I polled my district before the session began, and out of that, 68% said they believed marriage between one man and one woman is what ought to be in law. That's a pretty high percentage.
But there is something that is unique that a man and a woman each contribute into the raising of a child. And I think it would be, I use this word carefully, a tragedy on an epic scale to establish a social policy that we really don't matter. It doesn't really matter if a child's raised by 2 men or 2 women, but that's just as equally as good. I think it starts out from the get-go robbing these kids of a unique part of the human experience.
I think that the hardest argument that I've come up against in terms of people against the same-sex marriages is the family structure, that having 2 parents of the same gender would not provide the same experience to kids, and that's a valid argument in my view. I mean, a kid with 2 parents of the same gender isn't going to have the same experience as a kid with parents that are opposite gender, but neither is a kid who has 1 parent or divorced parents or any of that. I mean, there are all sorts of different ways that families work. So to say that a 2-parent opposite gender family is the only way that a kid can be raised right, I think it may be the ideal, but it's not certainly something that every kid's going to get anyway.
It's assumed that if you're on this conservative or traditional side of the issue, that you've got to be bigoted or homophobic, or you've got to somehow be uncompassionate toward, a portion of God's people. And that's not true. It would be like me saying to someone who came in a wheelchair, "Oh, I'm not going to allow you in here. You're not whole."
The mark of a good majority is how it tolerates or deals with its minority.
Something that I think is very important is for not only marriage to be defined, but also ask people, why do you get married? I want to get married because I want to have a witness to my life. It is important for me to have somebody next to me to come home with and share something that is so incredibly invigorating that I'm jumping off the walls with, or come home and fall apart to, knowing that they're not going to leave me because I am a bloody mess all over the floor. I want somebody who is there for me when my mom dies or when my dad finally dies. Somebody who is willing to stand by my side no matter what. Be it I wake up next to them every morning or we are halfway around the world, I will always be committed to that person. And they will always be committed to me. That is why I want the privilege and the federal recognition of a marriage between me and my partner.
I think that's the end of it.
Sarah just had a brand new baby. She calls him Sage. And Judy now she has a grandson, so she feels a little older. How life can change in just 9 hours. You were born like a baby in a bucket full of beautiful flowers. Caught in time tonight, gazing at the waves of an empty ocean. Hear the echo of your love, and I'm swept away. And sister got married inside a church. Held the hand of a man who'd slipped inside her soul. And I just stood by and sang and cried of a love that could come and sweep these ones away. And caught in time tonight, gazing at the waves of an empty ocean. Hear the echo of your love, and I am swept away. Don't know how I love you from so long ago. 4 years could be a short time to heal and let go. Remember how each day connects to the rest, and how by simply saying nothing we were caught in every lie. Lose until we try. One by one we die. Love sweeps us away. When my mother got sick, I wished it was me. Suddenly no choice I made could bring a healing. But then I saw how you heal, how we grow, and how somehow your plan takes us from our own. Caught in time tonight, gazing at the waves. I hear the echo of your love, and I'm swept away. I'm caught in time tonight, and I'm gazing at the waves. Wow, I hear the echo of your love, the echo of your love, the echo of your. I'm swept away.
Since the producer of Marriage Dialogs lives right here in Colorado, we took the opportunity to speak with him about the film. Here's Tom Biddle with producer Tim Milkkelsen.
Marriage Dialogs looks at the issue of same-sex marriage from a number of viewpoints. And what's especially of interest to us is that all of those interviewed in the film are from Colorado. The film's producer, Tim Milkkelsen, is an engineering manager living and working in the Fort Collins, Loveland area, but his creative side finds expression as an independent producer of documentaries. Tim's work has been screened in venues such as the International Film Festival in Hollywood. Well, Tim, first let me say how much we appreciate you making Marriage Dialogs available to us to show on Colorado Outspoken, and welcome to our show.
Thanks. I'm very glad to be able to show the documentary to a broader audience. Thank you.
It's our pleasure to be able to show that as well. I wanted to start out by asking you what prompted you in the beginning to make the film. What were your objectives in putting in all this time and effort?
Ironically, what prompted me to do this was Marilyn Musgrave. Although I've heard people in the GLBT community use different terms for her. I was reading a newspaper in 2004, and there was an article about her efforts to do a constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage, a defense of marriage sort of thing. And it just caught me off guard. Why would this bother anybody? I couldn't understand that. So I've done other documentaries and other video work. I started thinking about this and go, that's not a bad project to do. So the real goal, my intent of doing this is, I think at the time I thought that I understood the liberal side, the desire for being married for same-sex couples, but I didn't understand why this would bother conservatives. So the real goal was to sort of understand that, but then that turned into more broadly understanding the range of views, why people wanted it, why they didn't want it.
Which kind of brings me to the subjects that we saw in the film, your interview subjects. And I wanted to know how you went about selecting them. Did you have to put forth much effort to get them to participate?
There was a fair amount of effort in going through and getting people, a range of people. In terms of what I was looking for, I was trying to get a broad range. So I tried to do clergy, politicians, same-sex couples, regular heterosexual couples, elderly people, young people, high school students. I didn't want to go too young because of not really wanting to go and involve young children.
Sure.
So I ended up contacting 150 different couples, organizations, people. It was like the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, GLBT groups, a whole range. And out of the 150, I got to 61 different approvals to go and do to do interviews. Out of those, it was 44 were on the, I'd classify as the liberal side. About 11 of them were sort of neutral or informational, although I'm not sure everyone would like to be classified that I put there. And then there were about 9 conservatives. And so obviously, and this really surprised me, I didn't think I'd have that much trouble in Fort Collins and Larimer County finding conservatives
in Marilyn Musgrave's backyard,
right.
finding conservatives to speak on this issue. So
That's right.
They like to do that a lot. So,
which is what I thought, and it turns out they all have very strong opinions. Not all of them want to be on camera about it. So I'm actually very very pleased with the ones that did do it. I commend them on their trust in me and their willingness to talk. Yeah. So it was an interesting challenge trying to go and get more conservatives, but in terms of once they agreed to it, it was just a conversation, and the people were very willing to talk.
Right, and it seems like that with the imbalance then of the responses you got from liberal to conservative, that it might have created an editing challenge putting together the balanced presentation, but I think you succeeded. I was wondering how successful you thought you were in representing the general population of the country, or at least of that type of a demographic that's not big city, but is kind of general mainstream America. Do you think you represented that mainstream?
So I don't think it's representative of the mainstream in the sense of, it's mostly Caucasian, mostly Christian. There were some people of Hebrew faith that I talked to. I did not get to talk to anyone. I mean, there were agnostics and atheists, but there weren't any like Muslim, Islamic people, or some of the other religions. But in a lot of ways, this is characteristic of the demographic of Larimer County. It's, what was it, 87% white.
Right.
The next largest is Hispanic.
Right, we see those statistics at the beginning of the film, so you're really kind of setting up
Right.
who it is you're actually talking to. But I think it was good that average mainstream America kind of felt this is pretty much, this isn't the politicians, this isn't the elite, this isn't people living in inner cities. It's just kind of the typical American population that you talk to, maybe people that they can identify with. This is a hot button issue. I mean, it divides people passionately across the country. I mean, one way or the other, it's such a hot button issue. And I thought that right away at the beginning of the film, the definitions segment kind of drew those battle lines between pro and anti same-sex marriage. How important is that definition of what marriage is to the subjects you interview? That seems to be almost everything. It's so critical.
So in terms of how, I mean, for some people, it is a fundamental core thing. I mean, it's
it's a religious
thing. I mean, especially for the conservatives and especially evangelical Christians, it's all about sort of the Bible definition of what marriage is. And actually the phrase that a lot of people use is it's the covenant of marriage, which is, it goes back to biblical language.
Extremely biblical. It's
Right.
Old Testament stuff.
That's right. And they go back to the Bible and say the Bible says this, this, and this, and so therefore it has to be this and it can't be that. Of course, on a different side of the issue, and it's really not those folks and those folks. It's a continuous sort of variation of views and opinions all across. But for several other people, they don't care. Actually, a lot of people didn't care about whether or not they could get married as long as they had the rights associated with marriage.
Which brings us to that other definition of marriage that it seems like the more pro-gay marriage or the liberal side seem to look at as a legal definition, a legal contract. Right. Even if it is a religious ceremony, it's also a legal contract. And I thought that is kind of a stark contrast between different opinions on the issue, and that your film brought that out really well. I don't know if that's what you thought. That's kind of what I felt. But what did you come to feel was the central issue that divided the two sides of this huge debate we live with in this country today?
Yeah. Sadly, there's not one single point issue. It's because we're talking about civil rights, we're talking about religion, we're talking about gender orientation, there are so many societal, religious, cultural things that are all balled up together.
Right.
But what I saw was, there were some common themes that, not that they agreed, but both sides had issues around. So I mean, one of them was definition of marriage,
right,
as you mentioned before. And that included, Bible aspects and interpretation. There's a lot of discussion.
Interpretation, absolutely.
The whole contract versus religious covenant. was a common thing. So there were several people that said it's a contract. Other people said it's a ceremony. It's a religious act before it's a civil thing. And then the whole question of gay being a choice, which threads in odd ways with the overall dialogue. So that was the common stuff. On the liberal side, it's civil rights, it's separation of church and state, and its benefits.
Practical, tangible things that affect people's lives.
That's right.
In very real ways. And I wonder if you got, from a sense of making the film, a sense of how these issues can be resolved. Briefly on that, I mean, is there a solution to this, or are we always going to kind of have...
So some of it, as I think a lot of people recognize on the liberal side, a lot of this is fear-oriented. And so I think there's some things you can do about the fear in terms of communication, openness, having awareness, the fact that GLBT people are people. It's that they're
what a concept to some of these people.
They're not. Well, as one of the interviews said, a lot of people have this mental image of the GLBT community as being these very strange people,
right?
That and the media goes and plays up to that.
Sure.
So I think there's some things you can do there. One of the things that made me actually very sad was the realization that there are some fundamental issues that I don't think you can really get past very easily, and that goes to the religious side and the fact that people view this, as the one guy says, this is sin.
Sure, right. Well, and it's so deeply ingrained in everybody as they're raised, and it's passed down, and I think you see that happening there. And we are starting to run out of time a little bit, but I wanted to get my last question in here, and that is, you personally as a filmmaker and someone who's been on the journey of researching and talking to these people making the film, what is it that you've learned? What have you taken away from producing Marriage Dialogs?
It was a great experience. Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to all the people on both, excuse me, almost all the people on both sides. One of the things that surprised me in the process was in pre-production, I was talking to a friend who happens to be lesbian, and I was talking about the context of it,
right.
and I said, I can understand the gays and lesbians, and how I think the real problem is conservatives are tying that up with promiscuous, which is not the same thing. Unlike bisexuals, who of course are and I go, oh.
The light bulb goes off.
Yeah, that's right. So I didn't even get the word out, and I go, oh. Which just shows how insidious bigotry can be.
Yes,
I didn't even realize.
I think that's the ultimate message that comes across in the film. And, I wish we had more time to sit here and talk for an hour on it. I know you could. Many hours. But unfortunately, our time is up. But again, I'd like to thank you, Tim, for the work you've done in producing your film, for making it available to us and to our audience, and for joining us this evening. Thank you.
We'll have more of Tom's interview with Tim Milkkelsen on next month's show. But now, if you like the smell and feel of leather, you just might be a leather man or woman. And there are more of you out there. Colorado's leather folks recently got together for 3 days of events on the Colorado Leather Pride Weekend. Here's our report.
Hi, this is Mike Maez, Mr. Leather Colorado 2006, here at Colorado Leather Olympics, which is the culmination of Colorado Leather Pride Weekend. The weekend kicked off with a meet and greet at the Denver Eagle on Friday night, followed by the contest for Mr. Leather Colorado, Colorado Leather Sir, and Colorado Leather Boy last night at the atrium. So everybody's gotten together to have a little fun camaraderie, welcome the new title holders. Can you tell me a little bit about what Leather Pride Weekend is and how it came about?
Well, it was Jairus' idea to combine the contests. He's always been a great supporter of all the leather contests and organizations in Colorado, and he saw the energy that I was putting into my contests, and so he blames me for pulling him out of retirement to get back into it.
I do.
Yeah.
but make a long story short, if we are saying that we are a community, we work together, we have to perform that we are working together.
And what do you gentlemen look for in contestants?
Well, I look for not just warm bodies to fill a spot on the stage. I'm looking for potential title holders. I'm looking for, not necessarily a certain physical type, because there's a wide range of physical types in the community, and it should be that way. But I'm looking for somebody with the guts to stand up on stage and say that, yes, I'm ready and willing to be a leader in the community.
Well, I thought it was a wonderful experience. This is my second year doing it. In about 17 years, I've done it 3 times, but back-to-back the last 2 years. It was very well done. We had good community support, and the fantasies were hot, I thought.
It was new to me. It was a fun experience. John here was inspiration from last year that kind of got me going for this year.
Today we are doing the Leather Olympics. Jairus just announced the different games that are going to be played. A little mixture of all sorts of things going on over there.
Chesney Kleinjohn is very, very honored to be the recipient of all of these events for the whole weekend. And the money that they raised through admissions and through donations at all of these events are going to benefit Chesney Kleinjohn Housing, which is an apartment building in Capitol Hill specifically designed to house AIDS patients. And organizations like the leather community and different organizations are just totally essential for our ongoing health and for us to thrive. And Chesney Kleinjohn is just one of many organizations that benefit from these type of activities. So the leather community is so much more than just what you see out at the bars and at these events. They really are very philanthropic and of essential benefit to all of the organizations within the community that counts on these kind of fundraisers for their very survival.
Everyone's a winner. A few will walk away with the title, but everyone's a winner.
Denver's own Brandy Roberts hosted a party and celebration of 20 years of gay pride. Lucky us, we got invited, so you can see what was all about. Take a look at it.
Good evening, I'm Brandy Roberts. And I'm Martini Monroe. And we're here at the Ramada Gateway in Denver to celebrate the 20-year anniversary for the Mr., Ms., and Miss Gay Pride Contest of all Colorado, celebrating gay pride, royalty, and pageantry.
We have 5 contestants this evening who are frantically getting ready for a contest that is probably one of the premier contests in the state of Colorado for the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community. We'd like to thank Colorado Outspoken for being here and taking part in our evening.
On Sunday, September 9th, thousands of caring people from all over Colorado will gather in Denver's Cheeseman Park to fight HIV. It's the 20th annual AIDS Walk Colorado and the 2nd annual AIDS Run. AIDS Walk Colorado is the largest HIV/AIDS fundraiser in the state of Colorado. The walk is a 5-kilometer fundraising walkathon that begins and ends in Denver's beautiful Cheeseman Park. The walk benefits Colorado AIDS Project and the fundraising teams of more than 30 other AIDS services and education providers. For more information, just go to our website, ColoradoOUtspoken.org, for links to tell you all about it. Now, here's a look at the wonderful folks who made Colorado Outspoken possible. Hey guys!
Your business can be a part of Colorado Outspoken.
You can have your logo at the beginning and end of each of our programs.
And on our website.
We have sponsored packages for any pocketbook.
Send an email to sponsor@coloradooutspoken.net.
Or call us at 303-861-0829.
I will contact you personally, and you can be a sponsor of Colorado Outspoken.
Well, that's it for this special edition of Colorado Outspoken. We hope you enjoyed it, and we want to thank you for watching. We'll be back on Sunday, September 30th at our regular time at 10 p.m. right here on KBDI Channel 12, when we will bring you more of Tom's interview with the director of Marriage Dialogs. Be sure to tune in, and remember to visit us on the web at ColoradoOUtspoken.org to watch this and other shows in the past. I'm Stephen Montez. Good night.